The old house on Chrysanthemum Street had always held an air of mystery, a somber aura that hovered over its peeling walls and dust-laden windows. For Amelia, a dedicated art restorer in her early 50s, and her husband Benedito, a former naval engineer with a sharp mind for business, acquiring that property represented yet another challenge in their journey of revitalizing old buildings. They had spent the last 7 years transforming ruins into cozy homes, each project bringing its own peculiarities and silent stories. Yet the Chrysanthemum house seemed to whisper deeper secrets, echoes of a turbulent past that clung to its beams and creaking floorboards. From the very beginning, Amelia felt a subtle discomfort, a nagging sense that her expertise wasn't fully appreciated by Benedito. Though he loved her deeply and acknowledged her artistic talent, in the practical matters of renovation, her opinion was often relegated to the background. Benedito, with his precise and methodical background, tended to rely more on his own calculations and judgments, which at times caused small tensions between the two. Amelia, with her keen eye for detail and sharp intuition, often sensed problems that escaped Benedito's cold logic. This dynamic, while never leading to major conflicts, created a subtle barrier in their professional partnership. On a cold autumn afternoon, Benedito asked Amelia to go to the Chrysanthemum house to take a few crucial measurements for the installation of new kitchen cabinets. He had spent the morning overseeing the demolition of an old wall and needed the exact dimensions to order the pieces. Amelia, donning a thick coat and taking her trusty measuring tape, headed to the property. Upon arrival, the house looked even more gloomy under the clouded sky. The wind whistled through broken windows, producing a sound reminiscent of distant moans. Amelia walked through the empty rooms, feeling a shiver run down her spine despite the cold. She focused on the task, carefully measuring every corner of the future kitchen, noting the numbers in her notebook in her elegant handwriting. Upon returning home and presenting the measurements to Benedito, he frowned, visibly upset. According to his preliminary calculations, Amelia's numbers were off, discrepancies that could jeopardize the entire cabinet project. A tone of impatience colored his voice as he doubted the accuracy of her measurements, making Amelia feel diminished and undervalued. The argument, though brief, left a bitter taste in Amelia's mouth. She knew she had been meticulous, but the doubt planted by Benedito made her question her own memory. The next morning, driven by a need for clarity and a desire to prove her accuracy, Amelia decided to return to the Chrysanthemum house. She wanted to redo the measurements, this time with even more attention, to be absolutely sure. Upon arrival, the house felt different. A slight change in the arrangement of debris, a window that appeared to have been partly cleaned, little details that together created a slightly altered atmosphere. Amelia entered the kitchen and, with measuring tape in hand, began to measure. Again, to her surprise, the dimensions now matched Benedito's calculations. She couldn't understand how that was possible. Had she made such a glaring mistake the previous day? As she walked through the other rooms, Amelia started to notice other subtle yet disturbing alterations. A small skylight in the living room ceiling seemed to have grown, letting in a more intense beam of light. An old built-in bookshelf in the hallway, which she had measured the day before to plan its restoration, now looked deeper, and the sketches she had made no longer matched the space. A wave of strangeness washed over Amelia. She tried to rationalize, pondering optical illusions or some intervention by the renovation team she didn't know about. However, a silent voice inside whispered that something was deeply wrong. In the following days, the occurrences at Chrysanthemum House became more bizarre and undeniable. An interior door that Amelia clearly remembered seeing at the end of the second-floor corridor simply vanished, as if it had never existed. The wall where it was supposed to stand was now smooth and unbroken, showing no sign of a previous opening. Amelia began to feel a growing fear, a sense that reality itself was unraveling inside that house. She tried sharing her observations with Benedito, but he, increasingly absorbed in technical details and under pressure from deadlines, dismissed her concerns as mere products of an exhausted imagination. "You're just tired, my love," he would say, eyes never leaving the blueprints and budgets. "This old house is messing with your head." The most disturbing experience occurred when Amelia ventured down to the basement of the house. A steep, creaking wooden staircase led to the damp, dark subfloor. She descended carefully, illuminating her path with the phone flashlight. The basement was a broad, dusty space with cold stone walls that smelled of mold and earth. In the center, there was a spiral stone staircase that seemed to descend endlessly into darkness. Amelia shivered. She didn't remember this staircase. She was certain it hadn't been there during her previous visits. Intrigued and apprehensive, she took a first step onto it, but a sudden dizziness made her retreat. The darkness below felt palpable, laden with a sinister presence. The next morning, Benedito informed Amelia that he had scheduled an open house to show the property to potential buyers. He was excited about the progress of the renovations and confident they would find a buyer quickly. Amelia, however, felt a knot in her stomach. The thought of strangers roaming the house, oblivious to the strange transformations she'd witnessed, filled her with deep unease. She tried to persuade Benedito to postpone, mentioning the oddities she'd noticed, but he was adamant. "These are just details, Amelia," he insisted. "Old houses have their quirks. We're not going to miss this chance because of your imagination." On the day of the open house, the house was eerily quiet. The few agents and prospective buyers who appeared wandered the rooms with confused expressions. Amelia looked for Benedito, but couldn't find him anywhere. She called his cell phone several times, but only got his voicemail. A sense of panic began to settle in her chest. Suddenly, she heard Benedito's voice. It was low and muffled, as if coming from inside the walls. She approached one of the living room walls and pressed her ear to it. There it was, his voice, murmuring disjointed words, a distant, desperate lament. Amelia ran through the house, pressing her ear to every wall, every corner, and Benedito's voice followed her, always distant, always imprisoned. "Hey, you, who's following this dark story, be prepared. The darkness is only beginning to intensify. If you're enjoying this immersive horror experience, don't let this macabre energy fade. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the unfolding of this chilling narrative. And now, tell me in the comments, which moment in this story has given you the most chills so far? Your interaction is the fuel for us to keep unraveling the mysteries of Chrysanthemum Street. Amelia never saw Benedito again. The Chrysanthemum house had swallowed him, trapping his voice within its brick-and-mortar entrails. The police, called in by Amelia in a blend of despair and disbelief, conducted a superficial investigation, concluding that Benedito had probably left of his own accord, perhaps stressed by the project. No signs of foul play were found, and Amelia's allegations about the house's inexplicable changes were dismissed as trauma-induced hysteria. Alone and helpless, Amelia made a surprising decision. She would stay. She moved into the Chrysanthemum house, as if by inhabiting that cursed space, she could somehow keep Benedito's memory alive, perhaps even unravel the mystery of his disappearance. Life in Chrysanthemum house became a bizarre routine. Amelia became accustomed to the property's inexplicable alterations. Doors appeared and vanished, rooms changed size and arrangement, and the basement staircase seemed to deepen with every passing day, the echo of indistinct whispers rising from its depths. At night, Benedito's voice echoed through the walls, sometimes a distant moan, other times a faint call that made Amelia's heart tighten with hope and despair. She learned to ignore the constant fear, to accept the mutable nature of her home as an extension of her grief. Paradoxically, Amelia took over the restoration business with surprising determination. Benedito's absence forced her to take the reins, to trust in her own intuition and skills. She discovered a shrewdness for business she'd never known. She possessed, and her artistic sensitivity translated into unique and charming restoration projects. The Chrysanthemum House, with its mysterious aura, ironically became a sort of business card for her work, attracting curious clients fascinated by the story of the restorer who lived in a house that defied logic. Years passed. Amelia grew old in the Chrysanthemum House, her wrinkles deepening like the cracks in the old mansion's walls. Benedito's voice became more sporadic, a distant murmur blending with the creaks of the house. Amelia never found an explanation for what had happened, but she learned to coexist with the inexplicable, to find a strange peace in the company of the house's mysteries. Sometimes at night, as the full moon cast long, twisted shadows throughout the rooms, Amelia felt a presence beside her, a cold breath on her nape, and she would whisper back to the walls, hoping that Benedito might hear her somewhere between the dimensions of that cursed house. The Chrysanthemum House was not just her home, it was her tomb, her sanctuary, and the eternal prison of her lost love. And Amelia, the art restorer, had become the keeper of its dark secrets. We've reached the end of this somber journey along Chrysanthemum Street. We hope that this immersive horror has left you with goosebumps and shivers down your spine. If you ventured this far, it's because you share our passion for stories that steal our sleep. So please, leave your like on this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our next explorations into the macabre. We'd love to know what you thought of this narrative. Tell us in the comments which moment was the most horrifying for you, and if this story made you reflect on the mysteries that might be hidden within the walls of an old house. And who knows, you might also have a scary story to share with our community. We can't wait to read your tales.